Hi guys, Wash Conde here, and you're listening to Honey and Home. And today I want to talk a story, a short nostalgic trip to Bilbao. So first, you would ask me again, well, why did you decide to go to Bilbao? It's definitely not the most obvious choice to go to Spain, because most of the people would go to either to Barcelona, to Mallorca, to Lloret de Mar, to Madrid, at least, to Valencia. I don't know. And yet you're going to Bilbao. So what's so special about it? So let me preface this with a short story of how I learned about Bilbao in the first place. So, as I was studying international economics, the bigger part of it was also kind of about politics and what is going on in the world. And I learned about the Basque Country as well. So there was the movement in the 90s, beginning of the 2000s, called ETA, which was actually a terrorist organization who were trying to fight for the independence of Basque Country. And Basque Country is sort of located in mainly in Spain, but also a smaller part of it is in France. And Basque people, they have really distinct culture. So their language is nothing similar to French, Spanish, or any other Latin languages. They're probably closer to something as we Europeans would consider weird as Hungarian or Finnish, something that doesn't really have the same language roots as most of our languages. So I think the cultural difference, the language difference, and this sort of national idea that they are one united nation, Basques, that they have their own pride and all of this, it was a perfect combination of why would they try to fight for their own independence. And yet, clearly, there were some negotiations, and as you can see, as you know, if you haven't heard of Basque Country before, clearly the fact that they are not independent still. And there's been a compromise going on. The same situation as with Catalonia and their referendums. There's been a similar thing going on in Basque Country. So at the end of the day, it still remained a part of the Spain and a part of the France, their respective parts. So yeah, like that was one interesting thing that I found about Basque Country back in the days. Another interesting thing that me being a football fan, to a certain extent, I learned that their local club called Athletic Club Bilbao, they had a really special way of selection. So it probably is the only club in Europe, probably even in the whole world, who picks the players of a specific nationality. So Athletic Club, they have only Basque players at their team. And yeah, you would tell me that this is like not the independent state. So what they're actually doing, all the people who were either born within the provinces that are considered to be Basque Country, or their family has some Basque roots, they are eligible to play for Athletic Club. All the rest are not welcome there. So nobody else would be able to play there unless some relatives would be found. And that's the way they keep on doing that. So there are, of course, sometimes players who have not necessarily Spanish passport, but French, or I think there's been a guy who was Venezuelan, and they were all playing together. So, that's why also Athletic is being famous, at least in the football sphere, that among the people who are being football fans, especially who are looking after the Spanish football. So that's another thing. That's another thing that proved how proud of themselves Basque are, and that something pretty special can be happening in Bilbao. So having this thought in mind, I was checking where can I take a short destination trip while not really disrupting my workflow, because I was planning to go somewhere for like 5 days. And then I found out that it was quite easy to go to Bilbao. So I was like, hell yeah, let's do this. So first it would make you sound like, what can you actually see in Bilbao? So first of all, I think the whole vibe of the city is quite imperial, sort of the capital-ish, it still makes you this feeling that something monumental happening inside. So there is this quite wide streets, there are no classical architecture, quite distinct style of the Spanish architecture is in there, because clearly most of the time Bilbao is spent under the Spanish reign, and it's why they also inherited a lot from the culture and the styles of architecture there. And Bilbao is quite a big city, it's probably the biggest in the region. The whole city looked quite neat. Everything was quite clean, and that's already built you such a positive image towards it. It was quite green. There was this hilly landscape around. There is the mountains. There are those forests. It's pretty close to the Bay of Biscay. And there is this river flowing through the whole city, separating into two parts. Still, the one part is mainly on the one bank of the river. So, just even walking there and not necessarily having certain goals in mind of which exact sites you need to visit. Some of the tourists, they really want to have their holiday being so structured that they want to visit these specific sites at this time of the day and then move on to something else. I'm not really that type. I was trying to get to acquainted with the city myself and learn a bit more about it. So maybe that's why my reviews are not necessarily that informative, but they're more about my feelings towards the place that I visited. So I think the main site of Bilbao, and I think most of the people would agree with me, this is the Guggenheim Museum, which is a museum of the contemporary art, and it's famous for its special weird shape of the building. And yeah, inside you'll see a bunch of interesting contemporary exhibitions. I think I personally was lucky to visit one from the famous American portraitist who was making the portraits of any people he would meet, like in the street, anyone. And or was it a photograph? No, I think it was portrait. Yeah. So you're entering a huge red room, and it was filled with those portraits all over the place. And what is interesting, that all people were sitting, as far as I remember, just on the chair with the same pose all the time, and all what changes is the person that sits in it. So that was kind of interesting to see. So for me, that was the most memorable exhibitions out of all. I think there were also the huge installations inside where you need to walk certain labyrinth. But yeah, I think if I would try to spend more time in it, I would also find some more interesting stuff. Some of the exhibitions were also closed because probably wasn't really the season, as I went at the end of November even. So yeah, still luckily enough I went to Spain, so the weather was quite nice. Another site that makes Bilbao kind of famous is also situated next to the Guggenheim Museum, and this is the puppy, which is the floral statue of, you guessed it, a puppy. Exactly. So it usually on all the postcards of the Bilbao, so I should have mentioned about it. If you walk past the Guggenheim Museum close to the embankment, you'll see a bunch of other statues, and I think the one that is famous, and I found in some other places as well, it's called Motherhood, and it basically a weird creature resembling a spider with some eggs in it. Looks a bit nasty, but it is a interesting statue, I would say. So then, as I mentioned, Guggenheim Museum is definitely the main site, and my personal bests are the bridges, because for some reason I really like this architectural, infrastructural things. So there were a bunch of great bridges. There is this walk bridge for pedestrians. There is this huge bridge. When you exactly enter the city, you'll need to go through the bridge, and it has this red arcs. And when you already go in more to the place where the Bay of Biscay is, you'll be able to see another bridge, which is even considered to be a UNESCO protected site, which probably is even called Vizcaya Bridge, which is means Bridge of Biscay. Pretty straightforward. I enjoyed it, and also the landscape is with all these hills. It makes you feel the difference of the altitude, and it just makes it more exciting to check out what's going on, like the different levels that the buildings are built. That is why out of all the churches in the city, I remember the one that was on the hill, because it also took me some effort to get there. It wasn't like necessarily too much effort per se, but it was this Basilica de Bigoya at the top of the hill, and I walked all the way there, and I probably was the only tourist there, and there were some elderly people like looking at me, what am I doing here, just taking a picture, and like not necessarily everybody was a bit angry at me or whatever, but it just looked a bit funny. I think they all were like, oh wow, the tourists here. There were not so many tourists, to be honest. So then you first, from that hill, you'll have sort of a great view at some point of time if you'll like move around, because there are also quite some trees and buildings. And then going down, you'll get to like this merchant zone, kind of a market thing. And next to the embankment, there is also this old market building that at that point of time when I were there already, it was evening, so it was closed. But it's also considered to be a touristic site. So as I was already there, and as I already mentioned, I am a football fan, it turned out to be that there was a game scheduled for the time when I was there, so I was like, okay, why not to give it a shot, and just went to the football match. And the whole stadium is this modern, top-notch building, so it's pretty cool to even see that, and I honestly enjoyed the whole experience of being in this game, probably even more than the game itself, because the game, to be honest, was quite boring. But the atmosphere, the chants of fans, and just the whole experience was kind of cool. It was like really great modern stadium that the Athletic Bilbao is playing in, so that was really nice. Then I think another stadium that I sort of visited or went around was the bullfighting stadium, which seemed to be abandoned and closed, and I hope that there was no bullfighting happening in the Basque Country, but I may be wrong, as I learned that in some regions it's still happening, so it's not banned like in the whole Spain. And now I think the greatest part, that at first I didn't realize that Bilbao is so close to Bay of Biscay, and one day I decided to just go to the coast, and that was really nice. Like all those buildings with white walls, red houses, red roofs, you know what I mean? It gives you that Mediterranean style of the seaside buildings, architecture. You have this vibe, and you basically sort of next to the port, but if you walk further, you'll be able to go to the beaches, and you can just chill and walk into the water. Like, the water honestly wasn't the cleanest, as it was pretty close to the port, but for the rest it was pretty nice, so I enjoyed that. And then at some point I even found a small windmill right on the top of a hill next to the sea, which was quite a great reminder that my vacation was over and I needed to go back to the Netherlands to work and stuff. Still, I really enjoyed my time in Bilbao, and I would definitely recommend you going there. I think everybody will find their own way around, and my colleague actually, after my recommendation, even went there. So he personally enjoyed being in Bilbao, and they also found a bunch of other new interesting places. They also went a bit longer way to visit the lighthouse and some other things that I personally didn't go to. So if you are planning to go to Bilbao, maybe just reserve a few days, and don't try to combine your holiday and work, because that's what happened to me, and that's why I also didn't really visit that many things in Bilbao and haven't seen all of it. So I'm pretty sure there is much more to discover. Well, thank you very much for listening again, and I wish you a very pleasant day.